Give me fabric. Give me fabric. Give me microfabrics.
Put your socks on it. Hello. Hello, Lambert. Hello. It's covering up where it says live. Oh, yes, we live. 19 seconds in. And Lambert, y'all. Welcome. Girl, cleaning that camera. I'm trying to get nice and cute up in here so you can see our melanated faces. Welcome, y'all. Lambert. We up here in the book trap, reading up on the Black Jacobins, chapters 11 and 12. Figuring out this Haitian Revolution thing, taking lessons from the past, learning from our revolutionary ancestors, and driving forward to a future where nobody lives at the expense of another, because we have created that world through a dictatorship of the colonized proletariat. Land Back, speaking of, Hammer City is our project to do just that. Land Back was a goodie.
Share, y'all. Share.
I
want 100 shares today.
I want 100,000 shares today.
I want 100,000 shares today. I know Hash is going to share a bunch of groups.
At least 5 groups.
I know Kaya is going to share a bunch of groups.
Comrade Oleander gonna share.
I know Comrade Oleander. Oh, Chief Rob is in the building. I know Chief Rob is about to share.
I know Bree about to share.
Ooh, my Bree.
I know Bree would not share.
Land Back, Bree. I didn't see you in the outreach. Well, you may have been there. There's masks and stuff, so I can't see everybody. But I didn't see you in the NY outreach, Bree. Land back,
y'all. Make sure we share to groups, y'all. This political education is so important for our masses. We need revolutionary theory to guide revolutionary action. And where do we get revolutionary theory? We study how our ancestors collectively struggle to do it, right?
Absolutely.
We study the failures, we study the successes, and we take and synthesize and boil down what we can and apply it to our own material conditions.
Yes, these chapters were so good, Bree. And that's why you gonna share, right, Bree?
Yes.
We gotta have a sharing party. So let's share for Comandante Toussaint, who gave his life for the liberation of African people. I am concerned about this Toussaint, John, because by what we read in Toussaint was a fairly skinty man. And this is pretty much a thick man. This is a thick man.
He look real thick in that picture.
This is a WAP man.
He cute in that picture. Landback,
Mason. Mason. I need to hear your voice more in meetings, Mason. You need to speak up, Mason.
Speak your truth, girl.
Speak your truth, Mason. Yeah. Landback, Mason. Don't forget to share, Mason. Share in all those groups, y'all, that y'all in. Yeah. We are sharing. We are spreading the word. We understand that our people
need good news.
The good news. Our Lord and Savior is back.
Yes. Not Lord and Savior is the dictatorship of the colonized proletariat.
Landback DP. Double penetration.
Landback, y'all.
That's what DP stands for, you know.
Everyone knows that. Not digital proletariat.
No. That was never the case.
Never has been.
Never has been, never will be.
Land back. I'm going to share myself because I'm united with the need for a revolutionary political education for our people.
Okay, Kaya. I shared to like 3 groups already. I know them white folks going to be like, what is this? Bitch, it's Black Hammer. Back again. Hey, that's right. Through. Love you, comrade. Chief through now.
Chief. Put some respect on.
Chief through.
And out here in the
that
South,
meal you made look so good.
For real, that chicken
you gonna be our head chef at Hammer City.
This political education.
You and Comrade Mona gonna be cooking up a storm in Hammer City. Carla! Land back, good morning. I'm excited for the book trap. I'm excited for you. Ooh, I love that color lipstick you got on, Carla, in the picture. What color is that? That's popping. Chakonde.
Building Hammer City.
Oh, Chakonde, I miss your hugs, comrade. Chakonde gives the best hugs in the world. Shout out to your sister and your nieces and nephews that I gave masks to. I hope they're doing well and that they're healthy and good. And you're staying healthy and good. Benjamin changed it.
Yes. Landback, Comrade G. Benjamin.
Stevie them. Landback, Stevie. Love you.
Make sure we're sharing in the beginning.
Make sure to share.
Get this far and wide.
All right, y'all. The sharing parties
about to be over.
It's over. Y'all keep sharing. Land back, Jesse. Oh, Jesse, you looking cute in your picture. I love them shoes. All right, y'all. Land back. Let's get this party started. Keep sharing throughout.
Yeah.
But we've got to talk about this book, and we gonna shout out the people who be sharing. I'll do the shout outs. Manasseh gonna stay focused on explaining the book. I'm gonna explain the book too, but I'm gonna be looking at the comments because I love y'all's comments. Shout out to, is it Chief Shivani now?
Oh, remember we were talking about that last time.
Hammer Shivani.
Hammer Shivani.
Shout out to Shivani, who is the producer, director, and technical person that is doing the work right now. Poor working class sister from Florida. I'll put Eziobi. Help me. How you say that? Eziobi? Oh, I love that.
Please watch, subscribe, and share for more updates. Hell yeah. Land back,
comrade. Eziobi from the continent.
Hey, we got 40 up in here. Welcome, y'all.
Okay, yeah. All right, y'all. We about to talk about Black Jacobins.
Let's do it.
But first and foremost, y'all, we are also a fundraiser for the Black HammerCity. We are building a city in the United States of America.
Yes, we are.
For colonized people only. So no. Okay, and it's gonna be corona-free, pig-free, rent-free. Houses gonna be beautiful. You're only gonna have to work 3 days a week.
I'm excited to build a new culture, synthesize a new culture on land that is liberated, that's under the dictatorship of indigenous peoples. Period. Project. Check out that we got our constitution out. You can go and give feedback on that. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. It is 10 minutes in. Let's get into this book, yeah?
It's 6 minutes in. Go ahead.
It's 10 minutes past 9. Anyway, land back. All right, y'all. So we're reading from the Black Console. We had just
thank you, Stevie,
with the last chapter, talking about Toussaint seizing power. They got kind of independent Haiti here, or still called San Domingo.
Land back, Solomon.
Yes, land back.
Saw you out there. You was looking great.
Yes.
Doing outreach for the people.
Basically, okay, let's read the first page like we normally do.
Land back, Melody.
So the Black Console, it says, so long as the war lasted between France and Britain, Toussaint was safe. But peace might come at any moment now, and with the peace would come Bonaparte's special laws. The colony was devastated by 12 years of civil and foreign war. Of the 30,000 whites in the colony in 1789, only 10,000 remained. The rest had been killed or had emigrated. Of the 40,000 free mulattoes and free blacks, there were still about 30,000, while of the 500,000 Negro slaves, perhaps 1/3 had perished. Plantations and cultivation had been destroyed far and wide. For nearly 10 years, the population, corrupt enough before, had been trained in bloodshed and soaked in violence. Bands of marauders roamed the countryside. The only disciplined force was the army, and Toussaint instituted a military dictatorship. The ultimate guarantee of freedom was the prosperity of agriculture. This was Toussaint's slogan. The danger was that the blacks might slip into the practice of cultivating a small patch of land, producing just sufficient for their needs. He would not allow the old estates to be broken up, but bound the interests of the laborers to their work by giving them their keep and 1/4 of the produce. The generals in command of the districts were responsible for the industry of the laborers and the prosperity of cultivation. He confined the blacks to the plantations under rigid penalties. He was battling with the colossal task of transforming a slave population after years of license into a community of free laborers. And he was doing it in the only way he could see. On behalf of the laborers, he saw to it that they were paid their quarter of the produce. This alone was sufficient to mark the change from the old to the new despotism. For behind this despotism, the new order was vastly different from the old. The black laborers were free, and though there might be dissatisfaction with the new regime, as in the Paris of 1800, there was no regret for the old. Where formerly the laborers had worked from dawn until far into the night, now work began at 5 and ended at 5. No employer dared to beat them. Dessalines whipped blacks in his province, and Toussaint threatened to take away his command at the least complaint. It was not only humanity. Any regime which tolerated such practices was doomed, for the revolution had created a new race of men. Land back. So that's this first page. And I think what I took away from that was, one, like Toussaint is really focusing on reestablishing, or just focusing on production, right?
Yes.
And making sure that we can get production back up so that the colony is running and functioning, and just this reality that this whole slave revolution led to a race of new men, right? Like people with an entirely new like consciousness of themselves, of their capabilities, and that was a force that would keep the masses from keep the masses driving forward and never backward into this system of slavery that's so based on like our dehumanization. Land back.
Let's do a Black Hammer mug toast real quick. Shameless plug. Can we get a zoom in on these mugs, please?
Maybe we zoom in.
Comrade Shivani.
Closer to the camera. There we go.
Yes. Make sure to go on blackhammer.org and get you your mugs and t-shirt today so you can, read your book, sip your tea, your chai tea, or your coffee, or your water, and get in on the book club. Get your t-shirts. Okay, get your t-shirts. Anyways, y'all, this was really an awesome chapter. And like Manasseh says, like the first part that Chief Manasseh just read literally explains the whole part of creating this new man, and to create the new, well, we don't want to say man, they'll create the new human, right? You have to create a total different economic structure, right? Because what is culture or society other than reflections of the economic base of the society, which produces and reproduces for itself? And as many revolutionaries have said before, is that the most difficult part of a revolution is actually not like defeating white power or defeating the bourgeoisie and taking control of the state, but the actual challenge is to govern, right? To self-govern, to be a self-governing people, self-determination, to create an economy, right? To handle and solve the consistent problems of the people. Many people say Fidel Castro was an amazing revolutionary, right? Where Che Guevara was an amazing guerrilla soldier, right? And guerrilla leader. He was a fighter. He was a great revolutionary fighter, right? And when Cuba needed Che to be, over the economy, over the farms, and over these kinds of things, he couldn't do that, right? He couldn't do that, but Fidel could do that. And that's what about being like that long-term goal and things like that. Shout out to Che, everything like that. I'm just being dialectical materialist, just summing it up the way it was. But anyways, and so right here, Toussaint and Dessalines and the other comrades are coming together after this fight to create this society for the people, because the people need to eat. And Lezuan talks a lot about that too. Revolutionary leader of Vietnam, just about how the true struggle was to create this economy. And it's so difficult because first off, with colonialism rips you away from the stage, right? Rips you away from leadership, rips you away from self-governance for so long that you forget how to do it. Exactly. And a lot of the times when we try to figure how to do it, the only thing we have to look at is the imperialist government, the colonizer government, the colonial structures, Okay, Muhammadu. Yes. But land back. So just that. It's just really outstanding to see. And Toussaint here.
And I wanted to point, like, it's this thing of, like you said, colonialism, like, tries to rip us of our self-confidence, right? And so there's this, like, thing of overcoming, like, that's why I see here this idea of a new man has been created. There's this, like, psychological, it says right here on page 244,
new human.
That psychological weakness, that feeling of inferiority with which the imperialists poison colonial peoples everywhere, these were gone, right? And I put a little note next to it, but the material contradictions of colonialism are still there, right?
Yes,
capitalism is still there to be struggling in order to build this new economy.
And can we put up Hash's comment, like Hash said, which is really important, right? They tried to make it hard afterwards. Sanctions, colonizers are sore losers.
That's a nice
right, Chief Hash. They're always antagonizing and trying to stabilize. They create coups against you, right? They create divisions amongst the masses of the people. They poison your crops. Like there's nothing that, it's impossible to have this socialist nation in a sea of in a capitalist world. And you see that here as well.
It's not impossible, right? It's impossible to, it's like, that's why the need for the state, right? We have to have a dictatorship of the proletariat to protect, like it's a state so that it can actually protect that revolution against that counter revolution, which is inevitable. Because again, that colonial contradiction still remains, and it's going to try to, like reinsert itself.
It's impossible because what has to be done is that you can't have an isolated socialist nation. And that is why we built Black Hammer, in the understanding that all colonized people have to engage in revolution and be conscious of each other's separate but same and equal revolutionary socialist trajectories and movements, right? That when we are moving in the United States, we are moving in Africa, we're moving in South America, we're moving in India, we're moving in Asia, we're moving in the Middle East, we're moving in all of these places, because once we have been solidified, or we get a hand of the state, we get a hand of an economy and things like that, that these sanctions and barters and separations are going to be extremely difficult when we are popping up everywhere, assisting each other, and not being a socialist island in a sea of capitalism, where it is impossible to function in that way. You're in this consistent contention with, like a Venezuela, like a Cuba, right? That is always in this thing, right, that they are struggling with. And that is why Cuba, this small island, has done so much for African people in the continent, from Angola to South Africa, to Sierra Leone and things like that, right? And you have Venezuela, who works with Iran, and Iran works with Venezuela. Like, you need
that international solidarity.
You need that international solidarity, that international connection,
unity,
right?
Yes. Unity. So anyway, up in this book, you basically have Toussaint trying to consolidate this new government and build it out, right? Again, it's 12 years of revolution and like chaos. He's trying to bring some order to the situation. And he's building out this government where I'm thinking of on page, right? Yeah, it talks about in finance and taxation, maritime policy, just organizing the government, schools. And so if we could go to page 247, in the middle of it, it starts with personal industry. It says personal industry, social morality, public education, religious toleration, free trade, civic pride, racial equality. This ex-slave strove according to his lights to lay their foundations in the new state, right? So he's formulating this new state, right? Which is a state that was formed through a revolution of the colonized proletariat, period. In all his proclamations, again, but still within the confines of the contradictions of colonialism and capitalism, right? It wasn't like global socialism, but you have this starting point. In all his proclamations, laws, and decrees, he insisted on moral principles, the necessity for work, respect for law and order, pride in San Domingo, veneration for France. He sought to lift the people to some understanding of the duties and responsibilities of freedom and citizenship, right? This self-determination piece. It was the propaganda of a dictatorship, but not for base personal ends, right? On the surface of it, you might look at this and say, oh, this is not a socialist revolution. This is just a dictatorship of this individual. It was the propaganda of a dictatorship, but not for base personal ends or the narrow interests of one class oppressing another. His government, like the absolute monarchy in its progressive days, balanced between the classes, but his was rooted, right? His was rooted in the preservation of the interests of the laboring poor, right? A state always has to represent the interests of one class over another, right? It can't actually really just balance between, right? And it says his was rooted in the preservation of the interests of the laboring poor. With the growth of a black ruling class, complications were arising already, but for the period, his form of government was the best. I just thought that piece stood out to me, just in understanding again this as a socialist revolution of this representing a development of a state that does work for the colonized proletariat, even though it might look that might not be so obvious like from the outside.
For dumb white leftists, Nas is concerned that the dumb white leftists will not understand and get it.
A lot of our people be in that.
As colonized people, we are forced to be, we are forced to be, as colonized people, poor working class colonized people, we are forced to be realist. We are forced to be materialist. We are forced to take in the world as it is, right? So we understand that a revolution is an ongoing process, right? That it is not like making instant ramen noodles. That, you know, once the revolution happens, all of our problems are solved.
And that's what hashtag
everything is happy.
White leftists talk about how after revolution, nobody's gonna work. This shows what actually needs to happen.
Exactly. That it is a progress, right? And we as colonized people are understanding. And as you see the Africans and the poor working class Africans in San Domingo, that is now Haiti, understood and were patient with the process. As long as the process was occurring, they were fine with it. If the process went somewhere else, they were not fine with it. And in those somewhere else's, it was anything being given unequally to the whites, anything being given unequally to the mulattoes, then they had a problem with it. But when the progress was going towards the dictatorship of the poor and working class masses, of the freedom of the poor and working class masses, of the leadership of the poor and working class African masses, then they were fine with that, right? And so are we as African and colonized people. We understand we are dialectical materials, we're realists, we understand that it's not an easy bake oven situation, that it is going to be a process. The people of Cuba are very patient, understand that it is a process, right? They did not always have free healthcare. They did not always have free electricity. They did not always have free education. They did not, there's a process and there's contradictions that are being overturned. People can say certain things about, Cuba had homophobic tendencies and transphobic tendencies, but now look how quickly they have overturned those things. And you look in the United States of America, trans people in Cuba get free transitions and protections and things like that the United States of America does not have. Those kinds of things. But any which way, but it's patience. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight, right? Society is an ever evolving situation. So shout out to Son. And what we understand is socialism is the road to communism, right? Socialism is when the poor working class masses have dictatorship over the state, which is in the form of a party or a leader that is fighting and is chosen in their interest, fighting their interest, that has taken control of the state. What is the state? Hammers. The state is that tool of coercion, right? The state is that violent tool of coercion. The state is the police. The state is the military. The state is the prisons, the judges,
the schools.
Yes, the education system, the intelligence agencies, those kinds of things, right? And through that basis of the state, you have dictatorship over and leadership over the economy, right? Leadership over the people, them, right? The land, them, and how that is maneuvered and things like that. A lot of people think that you can have a socialist president that is over a capitalist state, like in Bolivia. It was still a state that was controlled by the imperialists, a state that was controlled by the bourgeoisie,
that military,
and they overturn the decisions of the masses of the people, right?
Versus like in Venezuela, where you do have the military on your side, that state apparatus, again, the repressive forces of the state, like through violence. But it's a just violence, like when you're using that repressive force to protect a state that works in the interest of the masses, versus using a violent repressive force to protect a state that works in the interest. Exactly, it becomes oppressive because that shit is.
Monaste likes to say repressive for when the people is doing it and oppressive when the bourgeoisie is doing it. I think that's beautiful, but either way, I'm gonna kick your ass. You can call it what you want.
No, it's just that it's always
gonna feel like oppression to the bourgeoisie. I'm gonna be mean as fuck with it. I'm gonna be mean as fuck with it.
No. I think that just to make that point clear, it's always the state is always a repressive force. It uses repressive forces in order to like maintain its dominance. It's just the case that
the state is the hammer.
It's just the case that when a white ruling class is using a state for 500 years to keep people down, that shit is oppressive, right? Oppressive just means long, cruel, unjust, treatment. When we seize the state and we use its repressive forces to defend our revolution, that shit is not unjust and that shit is not cruel. I mean, we might have some like cruelties, but it's like, is it cruel?
Oh, bitch, I'm gonna be cruel to the Clintons.
Is it cruel?
I'm gonna be cruel to the Clintons, honey.
Cool, I'm just like,
I'm gonna be cruel. Listen,
maybe I'm talking semantics. I'm just saying, like, it's not unjust. So to call it oppressive, it's not like, oh, we want the state so that we can oppress. Like, we want a world free of oppression.
Once I'm done waterboarding Bill Clinton, ask him if it was cruel.
their sensibilities,
rapist,
and their
murderer,
and their words their definitions won't be the ruling, order of the day. So they can call it cruel all day long, but
girl, that's cruel. That's cruel. No, I get you, and I unite. I totally unite. And I wanted to say that before we leave this chapter, yeah,
see it always come.
But yeah, so long story short, what we're just laying out here is that like socialism is when the poor working class people have seized power of the state, right? And like Hash says, state is the hammer, right? And we understand this is the road. The socialism is the road to communism, because communism is where there are no classes, right? And there is no state, right?
The state is supposed to work for us, not the other way around, right? And that's even shown in what you just now said, because at the end of the day, we're trying to just have us out here.
Period.
No state.
And how can you define what a socialist state is, right? And because somebody could say, well, I'm fighting in the interest of the people, right? This state apparatus says that it's fighting in the interest of the people. Well, sometimes they so bold and just say it's property.
The United States?
Yeah. That the police will say that they're here to serve the people, they're here for the people, to preserve the people, right? But what actually defines a state that is for a socialist state, right? A socialist state is the people to the party and the party to the people. That is how leadership is divided. That is how things are moved. And what that means, and what we have is the bourgeoisie to the state, to the state, to the people, meaning the bourgeoisie, the white ruling class, decides what is law, right? And those opinions are turned into laws, and then that is beaten on our bodies through the violence of the state apparatus, right? Which, as a socialist state, it is the people, the demands of the people are unorganized demands. We want food. We want an end to police violence. They just say those things. Those are great demands and valid demands that go into the state. The state organizes that, right, into programs, into industries and things like that, and then gives it back to the people and says, this is the solution. And then the people take hold of it, and then they create it, right? You will see that in this Venezuela documentary we're going to show come through
Thursday, 9:30 p.m.
Yes.
Eastern.
That the people were like, we are hungry. And the state was like, okay, what you need to do is go into these factories, break in, start working those factories, make the food, And the people said, got it, and move it, right? The people to the state, to the state, to the people. Any which way.
I think, one of the points that you were just making to bring back is like this need for a party, right? Like we need a revolutionary party to see
start
through
the limitations of that.
Exactly, right. Or wait, what?
Toussaint was seeing the limitations of being
just an individual leader, basically, or not just an individual leader, but without just not having a party apparatus to like forward the interests of the masses like through that state. So if we go
and seeing the limitations of a motivational leader, a leader that inspires people, right? An inspirational leader that those are great things, right? But it can't be that alone, right? That you have to have a party that is fighting for and in the interest of the poor working class masses, so that it's not resting on just an individual, right? And you see that with even with Mao Zedong and how those contradictions occurred and stuff like that. And you see that in like the successes of a Vietnam where, Ho Chi Minh multiplied himself in a Le Duan and things like that, that when you have that party apparatus, the production of these fine leaders and the best children of that nation, that colonized nation, are always being produced in that apparatus, that servitude building block, the advanced detachment, if you will, of the people. That advanced attachment of the people who are the ox for which the people lean on. Shout out to Hugh Newton for that quote. So Toussaint was seeing the limitations of that. You see in this book, Toussaint was riding up and down the island to figure things out. He was making surprise pop-ups to see if people were doing what they were supposed to do. He was sleeping only 2 hours a day. He was not eating that much. He was eating some bananas and drinking some water and just overworking everywhere here. He couldn't trust nobody. Right. It was like he had 5 different secretaries, and one would write one part of the letter, the other one would write one part of the letter, and he had to do all of these things because he didn't have this party apparatus, right? And he had people in leadership that weren't one to certain disciplines, right? And so they would go, instead of having a meeting and saying, Toussaint, we have struggles with you, they'd be going out to the people with those struggles, right? Causing divisions and all kinds of things that could have been solved in this party apparatus, because the people don't need to see these kinds of splits and fights. The people need to see a united front, right?
But Toussaint was moving, right, to get to this piece. There was this whole big part of this chapter is the fact that Toussaint's policy in terms of production was in some way like what's the word? I don't know, amenable, or like it was like it favored like white property owners, in the sense that he had this policy of like basically allowing them back in. And Dessalines was not so hot about that. And same with like Moise, other black generals in this like army apparatus that he had. It talked about Dessalines on page 256. It says he had no sympathy with Toussaint's policy of reconciliation with the whites. But dazzled by Toussaint's gifts, he worshipped his chief and obeyed him implicitly. And how you were explaining that, like the reason why Toussaint had this like reconciliatory policy with the whites was because he was trying to basically stave off France coming in, or wanted it basically. Like, can you explain that, Ken?
So basically, what happened was, Toussaint is trying to have this kind of peaceful transition, because they already went to this war and things like that with France, right? France has basically not been talking to Toussaint, keeping a closed mouth, not informing them, stuff like that, other than like economic stuff, right? The economic extraction of San Domingo. But beyond that, he was not having any direct conversation with Bonaparte or any of the actual leaders. So Toussaint was worried that a war would happen, right? And Toussaint understands like San Domingo is this small island. France is this huge nation. And at any time, France and these other white nations like Britain and America could team up on Haiti and things like that. So Toussaint was doing all these kinds of things. And Toussaint thought it best, like, hey, if I let the white landowners come back, right, and live here, it's less likely for who France sees as their citizens, their white citizens, right? It's less likely that France is going to come and rip carnage and da-da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, what Toussaint did not bet on is that at the end of the day, white people are going to be white, right? And the white people will come back and stuff like that. But once the carnage is out, white people are going to step aside, let that carnage happen, because at the end of the day, it is going to meet their material interests, which is being the landowners, the slave owners, and parasites, right? To be these economic parasites towards the Africans and the island. So Toussaint, in these kinds of policies, it was basically what we do not do at Black Hammer is compromise with your oppressor, right? But Toussaint didn't have any historical basis to really understand, other than slavery, to understand, how white people was going to act. He was basing it on how white people acted towards other white people, right? He was basing it off of, well, America had a revolution against Britain, right, and they were at odds at once. But once America won, Britain treated America as equals. America treated the British as equals, and they started to do trade again and go about their business, right? And so he judged it off of that, oh, this is the same kind of situation, right? We're having a revolution. We are free. We fought for this, for France, da-da-da-da. And that's what's going to happen. But no. That's white unity, and right. So you cannot compromise with your colonizer, right? You just can't compromise. And he tried his best.
And he's still trying to write, like, he's still rooted in the interests of the masses, but he's not, like they kind of ended that last chapter with, he's not necessarily trying to win the masses to understand like why he's moving in the way that he is. And so, of course, like we said before, they're seeing like just compromise with the whites. So they're just like, what the fuck the whites? Why are you compromising with that? And they're seeing it in this sort of racial lens, if you will, rather than trying to understand the different like class or material dynamics that are taking place, and that Toussaint's trying to navigate in order to protect and preserve this state, which is
well, I think that's a petty bourgeois like way to look at it, because I think that at the ultimate conclusion, it was the poor and working class, uneducated people that were just race focused, that their viewpoint, their narrative of the world was actually correct. Can't trust these crackers. Like, can't move around these crackers. To start what you doing. You know what I mean? That was the actual conclusion, right? And Toussaint moving in a way of like, okay, diplomacy with the oppressor, or that you can compromise and move in these kinds of ways and things like that, ultimately showed that the whites was going to come for and trying to reenact slavery, period, no matter what was going to happen.
Right.
And so that again, when you have a party
exactly.
that
To
it wouldn't be
all
exactly, that's where democratic centralism, there's a lot of centralism, but not enough democracy, right? That if Toussaint had this party, that it wouldn't have just leaned on Toussaint to make these very important and heavy decisions. It would have been this party that would have been a reflection of the democracy of the masses of the people.
Right. But again, that takes time. That takes time to process and develop, which is what this quote gets at here on page 258, right at the top. It says, beautiful. French generals, officials, and colonists who wrote reports and memoirs about these generals. So they're like going through the different generals like Dessalines, Moise again, who weren't so hot with this policy of reconciliation. The French people who wrote memoirs about these generals and other officials when at the height of their power all noted the ease and quickness with which they had learned to command. Pamphile de la Croix said of these old slaves that they had learned more quickly than French workers or peasants in a similar position could have done. This was probably true, and it was true. And it was because the Black leaders were not so permeated by the ideas of the ruling class as a French worker or peasant would have been. Mass support had elevated them and maintained them in supreme power, and the responsibility gave them confidence. Again, we have this massive revolution from literally being slaves to running shit.
Land back, Kaya.
Land back. Mass support had elevated them and maintained them in supreme power, and the responsibility gave them confidence. In one report drawn up for Hideville's private use, the author noted the color of each officer and official in a long list, and good, bad, and indifferent soldiers and administrators are divided equally among the three colors. But many of the Blacks, illiterate, had to have white secretaries. Toussaint was sending Black and mulatto children to France at the public expense to be educated so that they might return and govern. All he wanted was time. But yeah, just this idea of like, again, you don't have, there's this process of, I'm trying to tie back into the need for a party apparatus to clarify and like hash out those I guess just the direction that they're going in the first place, and that there are these limitations.
It's not this real like upholdingness of the brilliance of the poor working class masses, right? Because it's still this upholdingness of this bourgeois intellectuality, right? And even in how Toussaint moves forward, like wanting all of the people to become Catholic and wanting the people to, read these kinds of books, and how Toussaint leans on the brilliance of the white intelligentsia of the island, and not the brilliance of like the poor and working class masses, how he has the white intelligentsia come to his room and things like that. But that is a mistake that, the petty bourgeoisie make, W.E.B. Du Bois makes, and it sells out the interest of the people. Well, W.E.B. Du Bois cannot be compared to Toussaint. W.E.B. Du Bois is a horrible petty bourgeoisie sellout that when we are free, we are peeing on his grave. But, we're digging him out. We don't want him part of the world. Anyways, so you have Toussaint here, and you have just the people of the island here. Again, they are freed slaves, right? At the end of the day, where were they going to get this self-confidence from, right? Where were they going to get this confidence of themselves from? And even when Toussaint was talking about, Africa, he looked at Africa as the way whites looked at Africa, which is humans that can be turned into something that you need, right? He wanted 20,000 Africans to be shipped from Africa to be turned into soldiers for France in San Domingo, right? And it was just like, skrr, like, why are you uprooting 20,000 Africans from Africa? You know what I mean? But again, it was just those kinds of contradictions, which fortunately, scientifically, we understand that our theory is only sharp because of the theoretical mistakes of our past, right? So we thank Toussaint and salute Toussaint for how far he went, and we learn from that as scientists and say, based on this theory, what did Toussaint get right, what did Toussaint get wrong, and how we can sharpen our own fight. How did y'all feel about this chapter before we move? I would like to hear what y'all are thinking about the different things that we are summing up here.
I think we can't finish without talking about, it's in this chapter that they have the whole revolt, right? Like the black laborers such a revolt, because again, they're not so hot with this, like with the whole reconciliation with the whites thing. They got legitimate fear, like you said, like they're actually the ones seeing it correctly. Fear of counter-revolution. They knew, you know, that men like Sonthonax and Vincent and Laveau, who were really just these white liberals who weren't actually in the interest of them, but even just their like supposed, you know, being on their side, they knew that that was like few and far between. And they had a whole revolution that then, or not revolution, but like uprising that Toussaint, does that happen in this chapter? That Toussaint like represses down and is like, no. Yeah.
And how they were just summing up the good white people and not seeing that, oh, the good white people are these people that just have these good hearts and that's why they move this way, other than actually seeing the systematic production of that kind of sector of white liberalism to take control of powers and things like that was a necessity, because at that time France was going through a revolution and France needed the African slaves to fight in the interest of the white French revolutionaries. So of course you would have white people come to the island that were nice to the slaves, that talked sweet nothings into the slaves' ears and things like that, because that is what was needed at that time. Now at this time where we have gotten our revolution, thank you niggas, and now we need to reenact and re-motivate our economy, which is based in slave economy. We need y'all back on those fields. You are getting another type of white, right? Because that is what is needed to meet their mode of production.
All right, to answer Comrade Chief Patrick's question, was Toussaint himself a mulatto? No, he was a descendant of two African peeps, but he was like—
Mulattoes are Africans.
No, but descendants of two African. I was saying two African parents.
I know, but mulattoes are Africans.
Right, with one African parent and one white parent.
No, not all of them. Remember, some mulattoes were mulattoes because both their parents were mulattoes.
True.
Right.
True. Okay, I see that. But anyway, no, he wasn't a mulatto. He was an ex-slave. I mean, there were slave mulattoes too. But basically, no, he wasn't a mulatto. But he was part of like a quote unquote privileged caste of slaves. Like he was like not like at the bottom of the slaves. Like he had more of those benefits or whatever the fuck a slave can have.
He was African poet and slave. He was African slave. But no, he was not a mulatto. And I didn't know they would send the sellouts back to France to get assimilated. Makes sense for the colonizer. Sure does. And it also makes sense for the colonizer to get information on what's going on that island and the different separations that they can, and divisions that they can move. A house nigga. No, Toussaint wasn't a house Negro either. He had access to in the house, but he was a dog nigga.
All right, and then the last thing I guess in this chapter is that he sets up this constitution, and in the constitution it basically gives absolute local independence on the one hand, but on the other, French capital and French administrators helping to develop and educate the country, and a high official from France was a link between both government. Or what was my point here? He sets up this constitution and oh, right. Yeah. Basically, France is big pissed that like they don't really have much of a place in the Constitution. He's basically like, y'all can send niggas over here. Not niggas, but y'all can send crackers over here and they will deal with me and I will deal with them. Otherwise, y'all don't have like necessarily have like power here, which obviously pissed off France. And yeah, I think that's really all to sum up. To him, it seemed Toussaint was merely pursuing a person. Yeah.
Laying back, y'all. So how y'all feeling about this chapter? Before we get to the next chapter, we need donations for Hammer City.
Yes, we do.
So who up in here is going to CashApp or GoFundMe or Venmo, Build Hammer City and donate? Let's start $10.
Who get a $10
for
donation?
Toussaint. Toussaint starts with a T, 10 starts with a T. $10. Who's going to donate $10 to Hammer City? We can't just be reading about revolution and not be moving forward.
Truth.
the revolution.
Who doing it? We need 5, we need 10, we need 15, maybe 20,
We started with 10.
maybe 30.
We started with 10.
Maybe 40, maybe 50.
You can go above 10.
I don't know. Sometimes people be feeling hype on a Sunday morning. The Lord
Oh yes, the
drop
Lord
something
is
in their
traveling
spirits. And the money just starts to flow. Where it at, y'all? Where it at?
Absolutely. Yes. Ishmael said, bargaining with your oppressor won't end well. No, it won't.
Never has. It never has.
You can't negotiate with people who have no honor.
Chikunde. We got 10 from Comrade Chikunde.
Thank you, Chikunde.
Every cent counts.
Thank you, Robert Vanny.
There we go. 10 up from Robert Vanny. BuildHammerCity. No Rona, no cops, no rent. This is the place for us to consolidate and build that revolutionary organization.
Land back, Victoria.
Land back.
Congratulations on your promotion.
20. Okay. What do we got? 40 so far? We out here.
Big broke girl shit. Yes, Kaya. All right, y'all. So we go into the next chapter.
Oh, we got a solid 40 real quick. That was cute. I said we got a solid 40.
Got a solid 40.
That was cute.
That was cute. Thank you, guys. That's so awesome. Thank y'all. That's so awesome. Land back. I got y'all Wednesday. Thank you, Jesse.
Dope.
We got you Wednesday too.
Hey, and the next day. And the next day.
And the next day after that. So now we're going to the next chapter, which is the bourgeoisie prepares to restore slavery. Dum 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 dum. I'll read this one.
Go for it.
So it is page 269. It's not marked, Shivani, but I know you can find it. So I'll give Shivani some time to find it. We got us. That's right, Chris. That's right. Oh, that's Chief Chris. My bad. The bourgeoisie prepares to restore slavery. Great job, Shivani. Toussaint was perfectly right in his suspicions. What is the regime under which the colonies have most prospered? Asked Bonaparte. And on being told the ancien regime, he decided to restore it. Slavery and mulatto discrimination. Bonaparte hated Black people. The revolution had appointed the brave and brilliant mulatto General Dumas, commander-in-chief of one of its armies, but Bonaparte detested him for his color and persecuted him. Yet Bonaparte was no colonist, and his anti-Negro bias was far from influencing his major policies. He wanted profits for his supporters, and the clamorers, colonists, found in him a ready ear. The bourgeoisie of the maritime towns wanted the fabulous profits of the old days.
That's the counter-revolution.
The passionate desire to free all humanity, which had called for Negro freedom in the great days of the revolution, now huddled in the slums of Paris and Marseilles, exhausted by its great efforts and terrorized by Bonaparte's bayonets and Fauch's police. But the abolition of slavery was one of the proudest memories of the revolution, and much more important. Blah blah blah. I ain't giving no brownie points to the caucus. So, anyways, to the colonizers.
Dude.
So, anyways, let's get out of this subjective thing, like, oh, Bonaparte hated us. It wasn't about that. Again,
True.
That is a capitalist state, right? That they are under. And what did we as scientists, as revolutionary scientists, as dialectical materialists have summed up? A state will enact the way that the state is supposed to, and the state is a tool that continues the status quo, right? And in a capitalist state, it is the bourgeoisie who have dictatorship over the state and the state who has dictatorship over the masses. Right here, you are being shown that the bourgeoisie wanted resources. And in Bonaparte, they found the state that enacted their ability to get those resources. And when Bonaparte asked, how do I feed the bourgeoisie? It was told to him by his economic advisors that to enact this, what you need is to get slavery back. Slavery was what was giving us resources. Where were we getting the most resources from? San Domingo slavery. That's what we want back again, so I can feed these hungry bourgeoisie, the ones who have put and is keeping me in power. And that is how that is moving. So it's not about hate. It is about what the actual mode of production is, the means of production, right? That this is a colonial capitalist nation that moves as such. The France of today was the France of the past. The same France that is colonizing Lebanon, colonizing Mali. The bourgeoisie is hungry and saying, how do you feed us? And it says the colonies. And so France goes back into the colonies and redigs the old ways of colonialism, the old ways of colonialism. They don't stop being colonizers. They were in the neo-colonialism, but they needed the old ways of colonialism because the neo-colonialism was moving too slowly.
Exactly. I was aiming, by the way, not to celebrate all that bullshit, but we got another 20 from Comeback.
Yay!
I think it's interesting too. Like Toussaint sees, even as much as we do see kind of Toussaint apparently kind of valuing this like European I don't know, intellectuality, whatever you want to call it. It says here on page 271, in the middle, it is the middle of the first paragraph there. It is Toussaint's supreme merit that while he saw European civilization as a valuable and necessary thing and strove to lay its foundations among his people, he never had the illusion that it conferred any moral superiority. He knew French, British, and Spanish imperialists for the insatiable gangsters that they were, that there is no oath too sacred for them to break, no crime, deception, treachery, cruelty, destruction of human life and property, which they would not commit against those who could not defend themselves. It's still even here a little bit kind of couched in this idea of like, he saw that they were like really bad people, but it's really more like seeing that a pattern of how these people act within a state apparatus, like a colonial capitalist state that works to do exactly this, destroy human life. Cruelly and treacherously.
Period. And that this is like, basically, this is how they are moving, y'all. It is about feeding their bellies, right? It's not just, oh, you black, I don't like you black. It's literally, and to understand that is not to make them seem more Gentile, but to understand how severe and dedicated and united they are with colonialism, right? That this is how they eat. And as one of our main things as human beings, the main thing as human nature is survival. So it is what it is, as in the words of Michelle Obama, and we just have to sum it up and move forward. Man back, Teflon.
Man Teflon back. Peace. So basically you got Napoleon up in here condemning this constitution. Remember that constitution said something about the absolute local independence on the one hand, but on the other, French capital and French administrators like still coming in to develop and educate the country, right? Again, it is this little island. It's not like a world socialist, situation yet. Again, this shit has to develop. So you're still making these deals, like capitalism's still a thing. And what they want here, again, condemning this constitution, like they want full, I think there's a line in here where they talk about like having full, they wanted a situation where French capital would have full opportunity on the island. Not just this limited opportunity where you have, again, absolute independence. So they're trying to just reinstate slavery, colonialism, capitalism, or at least a certain form of it. Colonialism, capitalism, still a thing, but anyway.
And in this, Toussaint even acknowledges and says to them, like, look, y'all, like, we want to be free. We want to be liberated. We understand y'all need resources. Let's compromise, right? Toussaint is even willing and able to say, hey, fine. But as long as our people are not starving, as long as our people are free, as long as our people have access to the things that they need to be a developing human being, right? He looks at certain aristocracies and things like that and says that will be, our future sons and things like that. What he's seeing is like this advancement of humanity that needs to occur on the island. As long as y'all ain't disturbing that, France, we'll get you what you need. We'll send you the resources, stuff like that. We want to be a friend to France. We want to be part of France. They're like, still trying to compromise. But France don't want to hear none of that. Because at the end of the day, they're not trying to cut no resources with anybody, right? And the Africans on the island have contention with the whites because even though Toussaint is trying to make everyone equal, everyone is not equal, because at the same time, Toussaint understands that if you take white people's ownership of the land away, they not going to be with it, right? And they're going to employ France to have this war, right? And he's trying to keep away from that
policy,
period. But the Africans, what they are looking for is actual national suicide. And for there to be national suicide, you have to join me. You have to tie yourselves into me, which means that you cannot own the land, right? You have to give that up. You have to give that up.
They said, fuck no to all of that. It's actually in this chapter that you have the insurrection of the black laborers massacring the whites, and this is being led by Moise, which is one of the
land back, Alex. Land back, Connor. Y'all late, but you're here, and I'm glad. So share for all y'all that's coming in late. Your job is to SHARE, share, and give $5 to Hammer City, y'all.
Penalty.
And let's do another shameless plug. Y'all make sure to go to blackhammer.org and click store and get you some mugs, get you some t-shirts. We have bags, pillows, tarps, blankets, all kinds of things, and more things coming. We have a new wave of land back t-shirts that are coming. I just saw some of the stencils, and it looks so good.
Oh, there's a dope new what is it? It's a Fred Hampton, Emory Douglas tribute t-shirt made by the amazing Comrade Mona. It's an amazing design. Go check it out. It's the first thing on there. It's dope. It's dope.
And Comrade Mark is making some great land back t-shirts. They're just super dope. Can't wait for y'all to see them. But anyways, and of course, all the proceeds go to building this amazing revolutionary organization and Hammer City. So there, you get something back for your coin, girl.
So this chapter gets into kind of keeps going into this idea of Toussaint being disconnected from the masses, like being like united with their interests, but not basically working with them. And it talks about, again, there's this thing where they're more united with Moise, who's over here like, yeah, fuck the whites, fuck this whole like reconciliation thing. And on the top of page 276, it details that a bit. It says, gone were the days when Toussaint would leave the front and ride through the night to inquire into the grievances of the laborers, right? We have to be with the masses. And though protecting the whites, make the laborers see that he was their leader. So you have this insurrection, there's this massacre of the whites. It says here, this insurrection proved that they were following him, like following Toussaint, because he represented that complete emancipation from their former degradation, which was their chief goal. As soon as they saw that he was no longer going to this end, they were ready to throw him over. Again, it's those, I think you mentioned something just like that, like the masses are exactly what that just said, working, you know, like united in as much as they see that you're united with our interests. And as soon as that gets wavered, or as soon as that gets questioned, you have this insurrection, which was then like repressively reacted to by Toussaint. They march against the rising. They actually shoot Moise, which was a not so great idea, with the masses being so united with his leadership. Right, and then it brings it back again to this need for like the party, need to have a revolutionary party. And I wrote here that could like facilitate political education. And tell me maybe if this is a problematic take or like a petty bourgeois take or whatever. But I took on page 278, it said, to the blacks of the North, it's that second paragraph on 278, to the blacks of the North, already angry at Toussaint's policy, the execution of Moise was the final disillusionment. They could not understand it. As was and is inevitable, they thought in terms of color. After Toussaint himself, Moise, his nephew, symbolized the revolution. He it was who had led the laborers against Hudeville. He also had led the insurrection, which extorted the authority from Rome to take over Spanish San Domingo, an insurrection which to the laborers had been for the purpose of stopping the Spanish traffic in slaves. Moise had arrested Room and later Vincent, and now Toussaint had shot him for taking the part of the blacks against the whites. And I guess I just wrote again a note here that like if they had a revolutionary party, like that like contestation over whether or not this is just like a thing of color versus how do I put it? I don't know. Basically just this thing of them like not understanding why he's moving the way he's moving. Like a party would be the place to, again, like you said, democratically, centrally hash that out. But that doesn't exist. So you have these like opportunities for division. and disintegration of this like army and stuff that's
and let's not also act like as if France was not already up in that island causing divisions to make it harder and harder for Toussaint to lead. And that even like we say, some people that, you know, even though you're not the state, that you acting like the state, right? And it doesn't matter how honest or great or your struggle is, right? The road to hell is paved in good intentions, right? So you could have good intentions for trying to overthrow Toussaint, but at the end of the day, what does that mean for the real interest of the people who, at the end of the day, the core of it, the overwhelming value of it is self-determination, right? And you take away Toussaint because you hate white people, and that overturns, at the end of the day, white people gonna come in and fuck shit up, and that they're trying to take out a Toussaint, but having nothing to replace it and to defend their actions of self-determination. So again, this was a real hostile situation for everyone involved, and everybody did the best that they could do without a leading party.
But these trifling colonizers causing all this chaos, that's what we got to see at the end of it, because I think it's, you can, when you don't focus on that, you sit here and try to go, well, whose fault is it? Toussaint's, or is it the masses? Is it them for not, you know, like seeing
it's
the
colonialism
period? Exactly, that's what we got to get.
Colonialism's fault, right? And just like before, they had spies then, they were trying to cause divisions then, and they knew the lines of disruption, and they knew Toussaint was trying to appease the French and things like that with the whites. They knew that the poor and class Africans would have an issue with that. So cause that contention, grow that division, make them have more inward fighting. It's always their plan. It's always their plan. Divide and conquer. So
what do you think of this? This is such a, I feel like this is a famous quote that always gets quoted from this book. On page 283, the last paragraph, saying, I'm glad I made it. This book has been so much right now. Yeah, so many parallels.
I can't hear you.
Oh, hello? That's all right. Page 2.
Say it louder.
I was reading Chief Diva's comment. She just said, I'm so glad I made it. This book has been so much right now. So many parallels to the present. Yes, that's why we read. That's why we study. Not just to like know our history so that we could talk about it, but so that we can actually apply it to our present conditions. But it talks about on the bottom of page 283. It says, it was in method and not in principle that Toussaint failed. The race question is subsidiary to the class question in politics. And to think of imperialism in terms of race is disastrous. But to neglect the racial factor as merely incidental to neglect the racial factor as merely incidental is an error. I think it's supposed to say is an error, only less grave than to make it fundamental. What you think of that quote?
And wrong. The class question, right? It said in the colonial contradiction. The colonial contradiction is at the base. Right. Because without the colonial contradiction, you cannot give birth to capitalism, which creates the class contradictions, right? That one came before the other, and one is more prevalent than the other, and that is the colonial contradiction. And you even see that in the way that Toussaint and the poor African slaves came into power. And it's really dumb for C.L.R. James to come up with such, but C.L.R. James was the black petty bourgeoisie of Trinidad and Tobago, and was a avid adversary to someone like Marcus Garvey, right? So this again, and you can see even in his summation that C.L.R. James is always calling the masses like dumb and behind and uneducated and and he cannot even see the brilliance of the toiling masses beyond the brilliance of a Toussaint, right? And even when he details what makes Toussaint so brilliant, and it's how he talks to white people, how he eloquently uses the word, and that is not the real brilliance of Toussaint. The real brilliance of Toussaint is how he raised the life value of the masses of the people and claimed self-determination, made those start movements, right? And that if the colonial contradiction was at the center for a Toussaint and for everyone on that island, then they would have understand, hey, what's going on in Jamaica with the Maroons? We need to team up with them. We need to start fighting with them. We need to grow this thing. Where are the other African slaves in the other islands? Like, we need to team up and see that, okay, well, if the masses are at the core of the contradiction. If the poor and toiling masses are the ones that are going to get us free, if colonialism is at the core driving force, then we need to uproot what? Colonialism. And we cannot compromise with who? Colonizers, right? And that our natural and dialectical and materialist interest lies in the same interest of others, of what? Of poor working class African slaves, right? And other indigenous and colonized people. And that's what would have moved Toussaint and everyone else around the world. And it's the same contradiction that they create today, and that these black, white leftists create today, and teaming up in organizations and parties led by white people, thinking that white people can somehow have your same material interests when they cannot. They are colonizers. They have to be under your leadership, not the same level of your leadership, because their material interest is not rooted in anti-colonialism, right? And even in this, C.L.R. James said himself, this happened hundreds of years before, or 100 years, anyways, before Lenin or Marx were even a thought, right? Before Lenin or Marx was even a sperm cell in their daddy's balls, right? That Toussaint did this revolution, and C.L.R. James said himself that Toussaint was creating and doing, mirroring the things that was going to happen in the Russian Revolution. And how could this be? How could this be? Because at the end of the day, the poor, working, toiling masses that are at the bottom have no material interest in oppressing anyone and in uprooting all forms of oppression. So, of course, a socialist state would come into fruition even when you do not have the studies of a socialism or communism from a Marx, that it is in our natural means to produce such a relationship to each other and to society and to the earth, right? That at the bottom you find the true brilliance and dignity of humanity, right? Because you see that you do not want any of those things. So wrong, nigga. And that's why you ain't never created no motherfucking revolution or revolutionary organization.
I guess the way I saw this, like, I saw it in some way as trying to combat this idea of trying to
no compromise. Race. It has to be doom. Because when they try to muddy it, it becomes it pulls it right back into this thing, right? And when they put this race thing, is to make it this pseudoscience of race that white people have, where it's really the colonial thing that we are fighting against. Colonialism, which is a dialectical materialist
like it thing. Tries to, it's at least the way I read it, like I feel like it tries to combat this idea of, oh, race is just this like cultural, it's just part of it's just a reflection, it's just like this ideological thing, and class at the base of it is at the core, right? And that's why it makes this white left, the white left like argument of our, workers of the world unite, and race is really not, like it's this, class before race. But then he tries to say, but to neglect the racial factor as merely incidental is an error only less grave than to make it fundamental. Like he tries to point out how race, which is like almost like it's like a proxy for talking about colonialism. Being petty
bourgeoisie, unclear to hide their real interests, and all theory represents a certain class and a certain nation, and it is direct. It is direct. Theory is direct. And when it is not, it is still direct. You got to see the directness of it. And when you are not pushing for the leadership of the poor, working class Africans and colonized people of the world, if that is not the direct thing that you are,
and if that's not the direct source of your theory,
it ain't for us. It's trash, and it's a weapon against our leadership, and we cannot dignify that in any sort of word, my darling, my land back,
y'all.
We are uncompromising.
Amen.
Salute, Muhammadu Diajni. Yes.
Land back.
We are uncompromising, y'all.
Laid out beautifully by Gazi. #fuck Marx.
That's right, Benjamin.
We're gonna be all thirsty tears.
I know we are about to be done soon. What's the next book? Ooh, we will announce that in the next
book trap.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned, y'all. This last chapter is a long one.
Ooh, it's like 3 hours on the audio book.
Yes, y'all. So get ready. All of this was building up to the actual revolution, which I appreciate. I appreciate that. Lynn back. Salutes to you and as well, comrade. I see you. Yes, we see you. We see you, comrade Solomon, working hard in them streets. Yes.
So yeah, you got Francis headed on in.
France is coming. So Toussaint sees France coming, and France has a whole fleet coming out. Like France is in the conscious understanding that they are about to fight a liberated nation, right? That they are going to go against liberated nation. They are not going up against, France is very clear. They're not going up against just some ragtag groups of African slaves, revolters, that they're going up against a conscious, militarized, militant, disciplined, organized force in this island, and they are sending a fleet as if they were fighting another European nation. And what beauty would it have been met if they had to fight against all of the freaking Caribbean, right? That was also struggling to get free. And that is why we find that our true liberation, our true freedom, our true duty and destiny is found in the toiling masses, right? So if I was Toussaint, I would have been organized in Trinidad, Jamaica, St. Lucia, all of the Caribbean, right, to join forces and to free the slaves, all of them, against these forces where they would have to fight all of us, right? And if we talking about Africa, we go in Africa to get them revolutionized as well.
But it seems like the error, right, is that there's this like disconnect, a brewing because of colonizers, and they expect them ways between the masses and Toussaint. So it says here, right, again, like on page 284, Toussaint explained nothing and allowed the masses to think that their old enemies were being favored at their expense. In allowing himself to be looked upon as taking the side of the whites against the blacks, Toussaint committed the unpardonable crime in the eyes of a community where the whites stood for so much evil. That they should get back their property was bad enough. That they should be privileged was intolerable. And to shoot Moise, the black, for the sake of the whites was more than an error. It was a crime. Yeah, I'm trying to connect it to just how
if they had a party, he would not have had to shoot that nigga.
Exactly.
And they would have overturned that contradiction.
It says too on page 286, right, again, he talks about, as it was the policy that he persisted in, reduced the masses to a state of stupor. And then it goes down in the middle of that page, on page 286, it says, it is the force that counts. And chiefly, this is about our principle of unity number 4 that we've been really talking about this whole time, that it is the colonized proletariat that must lead in order to, smash colonialism, capitalism, imperialism.
Hold on. I'm getting a word. Get me big, Shavana. Get me big, girl. Woo! Getting a word. Getting a word. Getting a word. Getting a word. Getting a word.
Take it away, girl.
This also lays out the contradictions of these like colonial borders. Because once Haiti is free, Haiti should be organizing for the other islands to be free as well, right? To spread that out, that is the root of it all, right? But Toussaint saw this more unity with France than he saw a unity with the other colonized islands that were around him that had the same people with the same contradictions, with the same enemy, right? And that is what's so important about Black Hammer, is that we are moving beyond those borders and uniting, that we are doing the exact thing that Toussaint should have done in our inception is creating these this international unity of colonized people, meeting people everywhere around the world that have our same material interest and have this same contention with colonialism and these colonizing forces, and to thrust that, right? And it is so beautiful.
Were a little too focused on the imperialists and what they were going, like how they were moving or what they were thinking. It has that quote on page 286. It says, "It is force that counts, and chiefly the organized force of the masses."
Can I get an amen in the comments? Amen. Come on, y'all. Y'all listening? Y'all gotta listen. That's a word. That's a word. Say amen for the word. Y'all don't hear me. Y'all ain't hearing me.
If you're hearing Chief Gazi, let's get a $5 in the comment.
That is why Black Hammer is in these streets.
Straight up.
In these streets, in these toiling mass streets all over the world. Straight all up. Over the world. That's why we are in Nigeria. That's why we are in Ghana. That's why we are in Kenya. That's why we are in South Africa. That's why we are all over the continent. That's why we are in Brazil. That's why we are in Venezuela, right? That's why we are in Spain even, and the United Kingdom, And Canada, wherever our toiling masses are, we are. People say, where is Black Hammer? We say in the hearts of poor working class colonized people that want to be free. Period. We're everywhere, goddamn. And you're gonna have to fight us everywhere, goddamn.
Period. Anyway, let me read this quote real quick. It says, "It is force that counts, and chiefly the organized force of the masses. Always, but particularly at the moment of struggle, a leader must think of his own masses. It is what they think that matters, not what the imperialist thinks." And that was the error that he made, unfortunately. It says, Toussaint, as his power grew, forgot that. He ignored the Black laborers, bewildered them at the very moment that he needed them most. And to bewilder the masses is to strike the deadliest of all blows at the revolution. Moise's bitter complaint about Toussaint and the whites came obviously from a man to whom Toussaint had never explained the motives of his policy. Yeah, that's the lesson here. I mean, that I'm taking is that unity with the masses, unity with them. Like, yes, we have to have that colonized proletarian leadership, but that colonized proletarian, like that leadership has to be united and like directed and guided by the masses. And here it was all fucked up.
The masses want us to vote for Kamala Harris.
Right.
You have to have that advanced attachment, which I don't think that that Toussaint separated from the masses. He was fighting for the interest of the masses as well, as best he saw it, right?
But it can't just be the individual doing it as best he saw it. It has to be the conscious masses working. Like it has to work in unity. Like that there has to be a unity between that leadership and the masses, like consciously moving. It can't be separate, which is what happened here, and that led to this.
But I don't know if it was separate. I don't think the people wanted to engage in a war with France either. In this war with France either that was going to come. They wanted to keep their freedom as well. And he wanted to keep their freedom. And he sought to keep their freedom by having appeasement with France. They did not see that their contention with these white people on the island was going to separate them from France because they've been killing white people.
And again, they would have, there might have been more of that unity with a party, organization, or apparatus to like arrive at that unity. I'm just saying there was like a disconnect. Like even if like Toussaint was still moving in the interest of like what he saw as the interest of the masses, and we could even say is the interest of the masses, like if the masses aren't on board with that, like it's not gonna function, it's not gonna like work, it's not gonna move like it should. Like that's that. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I mean, it just speaks to it because you need the like it says the very moment that he needed them most, they were bewildered, like they were pissed that he shot Moise. They were pissed that they're seeing him as like moving in the interest of the whites, or like at least giving concessions to them. So there's that disconnect. It just again, it speaks to me to the importance of the
masses,
and that leadership being connected with the masses. Because even if the leadership wants to like be like, well, I'm just gonna move in the interest of the masses, like for y'all, maybe it speaks to his like that idea of like I said before, him wanting to like he wanted time to develop like the mass laborers and such. Who we calling? My Lord. Yeah. Even if it's a strategy with their best interests in mind, basically, that's all I was trying to say. Yep, there it is. The masses have to be that driving force. And they are the driving force. Like they literally had a whole insurrection and shit. Like that had to be repressed because it wasn't like their force wasn't directed in the not correct, but like it wasn't directed in an effective manner to like stave off this whole French invasion.
But they defeated the French invasion, so they had to be united with him somewhat for that to happen, right? And sometimes, and I'm not saying that he was correct in this one, but sometimes you do have to distance yourself from the masses, even a leading party, right? that when and the masses want leadership. The masses do not want a follower, right? The masses don't want you to just follow them. Because again, like I said, like the masses of Black people in America want us to vote for Kamala Harris, and we have to say no. And the same way that the masses wanted us to be united with Barack Hussein Obama, and we have to say no. But even will that make us unpopular for a time? Yeah, but at the end of the day, the conclusion comes and it always shows itself. And you see what happened, and you see what I was trying to do. And I think in Dessalines, what we're going to see here is like, yes, that there was the detachment, but the people did not see that as at the ultimate conclusion that Toussaint was selling out their material interests. They saw that as for that time, like, why are you not doing what we wanted you to do? But once the contradiction sharpens itself and they see what is about to concur, they see, oh, that is what Toussaint was trying to keep away from us, and still united with Toussaint against the French, and ultimately to defeat, and which you need a extreme high level of unity to defeat Napoleon, right? And so they at the end of the day saw where Toussaint was trying to go, even if it wasn't correct. What they saw was Toussaint moving in their best interest, and I think that Toussaint understood that he had enough capital to move in that way. But again, a party would have consulted with the whole like Moise thing, and then summing up who Moise was around them. Selling out may give you 15 minutes of popularity, but you end up on the wrong side of history. Exactly, the people will turn on you. Kwame Nkrumah, first speech as Ghana's president, correctly laid out, another nigga that didn't have a party, correctly laid out their independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with a total liberation of all of
that
Africa.
Speaks to that border question you were talking about, right?
Thank you, Dan. 100%.
Yes, unity. And what I think I appreciated what Chief Muhammadu said too. If the masses aren't united with the strategy, it won't be successful. It spoke to me that what you're saying, like, well, yeah, our masses want Kamala Harris. Our masses want, well, you know, do they really want Kamala? Our masses can be united with this bullshit, right? And it speaks to the fact that again, when that's the strategy of the white ruling class. They want our masses united with their shit, and when they do have them united, their tactics are successful. Which is why we have to win our masses to the correct strategy, because our masses are won to a certain strategy. It's just a bullshit strategy that has nothing to do with their liberation. They think selling out is long term because they get that coin, but in reality, they become isolated and a slave to the system. Period. Yeah. Land back. All right, you all. I got a meeting at 10:30 though. Land back. Thanks for coming through, y'all. Keep sharing this video. You know this political education is fire. Keep following along. We got our last chapter coming up. The War of Independence is 3 hours.
Danny said, and today we have Black Hammer taking it even further to unite with all colonized people. Period.
Exactly. Land back. Yes.
So they turned on him. It wasn't a revolutionary party. It was the
people don't know what you. Didn't Nkrumah have a party, but they turned on him?
It wasn't a revolutionary socialist party. It was the same governing people that represented the interest of the petty bourgeoisie, which is why they turned on him.
Tragic. Tragic.
No party that is built by the poor and working class, a revolutionary party built by the poor and working class, then you ain't got no party, nigga. You ain't got no party. A party don't do that, what you just said.
I wish it was longer. What the chapter? Our book
session.
Oh, this what we just did?
Yes, girl.
Land back. Appreciate you. What was I gonna say? I'll be blinking. Yeah, I don't know. Join us next week for the War of Independence. All right, Hammer City. I wanted to bring it back to Hammer City. We building a city, y'all. No rent, no cops, no Rona, no white people. All colonized people building revolutionary self-determination for our people, forwarding the material interests of our people, building that colonized unity globally, that we understand is necessary to overturn colonialism. We trying to build Hammer cities, not just in Turtle Island, but on the African continent, in Asia, in South America, all over the world. We need these bases to build up our state apparatus, our dual contending power that will overturn and crush colonialism, capitalism, imperialism.
I wanted to sharpen the whole question of like Nkrumah's party, because also if you read Nkrumah, who did Nkrumah think the leadership class was going to be, right? And Nkrumah thought the leadership class was going to be the petty bourgeoisie intelligentsia. And he wrote about how amazing they were of being in these white spaces and getting all this intelligence, but then ultimately contesting with them, right? And not the actual like toiling masses. So he had this petty bourgeois party that did petty bourgeois shit, y'all. That's problematic. Any which way, make sure to donate to Hammer City. We out this bitch. Hashtag BuildHammerCity. Also, y'all, hit up your local leadership. All local leaders of chapters, regions, and nations have now started to create Twitters. So make sure to follow those Black Hammer Twitters. We'll be sending out newsletters and stuff later. But for right now, make sure to follow your local Black Hammer Twitter pages, y'all. Land back.
Land back, y'all. Keep sharing this.
BuildHammerCity.
BuildHammerCity. BuildHammerCity.
Yes, come on now. Building a city. No Rona. Yes, no rent, no white people. Hashtag BuildHammerCity. BuildHammerCity. Land back.